Hello and welcome to another episode of Global Pause Rethink the Future. So in today's podcast, we're going to be looking at the nature of protests and how that relates to a theme that we've been developing over the last few episodes that relates to temporalising place. So it's kind of the thread that we're tracing here, really looking at the implications, I suppose, of our understanding of justice, which we've touched upon, and the way how obviously that can potentialise or initiate movements within the world that try to address certain issues, but because of the nature of the understanding that underwrites these movements, it kind of problematise the effectiveness of them. So that's essentially what we're going to be talking about today. So we're really looking at more the kind of political ramifications of what I've been talking about in all the prior episodes. That we're starting to look at more the marginal way how this thing works and the way how it either undermines the political culture that we accept for ourselves. And invariably we accept the world as a given, so we accept the power structure of the world as a given when we accept the limitation of our agency as a given. All right, and so we have covered off the nature of what we are advocating, which is the democratisation of creativity. So if we are market orientated and you have agency as far as what you can buy, because you are invariably just considered to be a consumer of life and to be a consumer, so you're not ever regarded as being a creator in that regard. Your lot is reduced into what you can buy. Okay, that's the so even on politics, anything that where market kind of understanding of interaction is the mainstay is basically means to say that you can consumer. So you can be a consumer of narratives, of information, of goods, services, anything. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what it is. If there's a market for it, or if there's an orientation that I suppose that inhibits you towards a certain way that actually more legitimizes the unquestioning of that way, and conspiracy theorists is the classic example of what I'm talking about. If you get beholden to conspiracy theories, and invariably what you do, you get beholden to a narrative to such a degree that you actually don't stop to question even the source or the narrative, in contrast to maybe a deeper understanding of what you are trying to uncover when you are beholden to a narrative such as a conspiracy in that regards. Not to say that the conspiracy doesn't exist. Of course it does, but it's whether or not you're beholden to it in a manner that you're not really looking at the actual issue. All right, so. But invariably, these things are all based upon, agency. You have agency. You choose. All right. So even the narratives that you choose are indicative of agency. So when you're looking at protest movements in that regards, what's the driver of them? What's the initiating? There can be initiating cause. I mean, this is right throughout history. So it can either be a grievance from a circumstance, so a specific event as such that disposes people towards protesting. It can be just the sense of injustice. So in that regards, it's all based upon injustice to a degree. It always is. So whether or not it's the specific event, or whether or not it's just the duration over time where, say, a draconian measures of power, and more invariably it always relates to obviously power, is that their way of controlling is such that the populace at large, this gets jack of it, and so therefore mobilising in order to not mobilising to do what? Now you might say, well, there's an end. An end you can say is revolution in some manner. I don't want to go into revolution, as it were, the nature of revolution. I really want to look at what's happening when people protest. What are they doing? What are they doing when they're doing that? Because if there's agency, all right, and so they go to the streets to express themselves, okay? So invariably in our cities, if they're market orientated, our whole way of life, our public space is commercial. Okay, it's commercial in the sense that the space that we share with other people is underwritten by the preeminent good of our time, and that unavowed utopianism is our space. So, when you are, doing your thing in your day, and that preeminent good of time is the underwriter of your want, such that you are going about your business. So whether or not you're on a lunch break in work, or whether or not you need to go down to the shops, or whether or not you're going to a bar with your friends, it's all presupposes the preeminent good of your time. So the marginal way, this is the problem with it here, is that the places that we actually share are marginal because of that underwriter of time, unavowed utopianism. You can not temporalise in the manner that you could if you didn't have to secure the means towards the end. So the means towards the place that you were sharing, say, with your friends in that regards, in order for you to share a place. So in order for you to go to have a drink somewhere, obviously it presupposes that you both have money in order to go enjoy yourself. So if it presupposes money, it presupposes that you have worked in order to secure the money in order to go to the place in order to drink. I mean, it's just common sense. I mean, it sounds like ridiculous to even say it, but, just hear me out. So in the case of protest, so we talked about, and I always talk about the issue here is that, okay, because of the marginal way how we receive ourselves, when we take the indivisibility of our time, so our time, the lived experience of our lives, okay, it's indivisible, but we marginalise it or when we accept our time as an economic good, all right? We accept our time as an economic good. It means to say that the margin between what is a means and an end, that shift, that the indistinction or where that margin lies within you is in you. And if it's in you, it's no place. So if it's no place and the market for your time is in no place, it's utopian. And that's the unavowed utopianism that we're talking about. So when you're looking at the way how I've been advocating to potentialise your time beyond the economic good that you receive it as, the way how you do that is that you need to temporalise place. So you need to share place with other people. So let's think of what's happening when people protest. So here you have people, all right, that are protesting. So what are they doing? They're taking, all right, everybody, this is the whole thing about our way of life. There's no outside, all right? When the preeminent good of your time is such, it claims life. Absolutely. Now, why? Because of the marginal way that we receive our time, and we equate our time into money. If it's an economic good, it presupposes money, and if it presupposes money and we equate our time into money, then money is a sheer claim on life, all right? And it works in the marginal way, between a means and an end. Okay, so in the regards of people protesting, what are they doing? All right, so they're taking the preeminent good of their time. All right, they're potentialising it beyond the economic good in order to potentialise place. Okay, essentially what they're doing, they're potentialising place. So they're sharing a place with other people. Okay, so let me just drink my coffee here. But think about what's happening here. Okay, this is why problems with protests. This is the reason why there's a problem with protests, because they don't essentially work, because they're beholden to what is the place that they're temporalising. I mean, how are they temporalising place? All right, so there's an adversarial nature. All right, so they're facing off against power. Now, what's the power? All right, in that context? So if we work back to the agency that they have in order to potentialise their time beyond the economic good, but in order for them to do that, they're temporalising a place that they share with other people, say in a city on the streets, which that place that they share is marginal, and yet the agency that they've got there to temporalise place is facing off against a power. It's ultimately the power that they've removed from themselves to begin with, okay? This is the strange thing about it, is that if you're looking at the indivisibility of life, and we are a means and an end, and if you don't demonstrate the absolute agency that you have as an indivisible human, all right, you are not a means or an end. You're a whole in that regards. then if you are not demonstrating agency primordially, all right, the way how that you can share, so the world is not a given, okay, you democratize creativity where you are creating the world, and you're creating a world where what you're doing is that you're removing the marginality of your time, and so therefore you're temporalizing the indivisibility of time, but you're doing it with other people. But if you are potentializing your time beyond the economic good in a manner that you're facing off against that power, because the world is a given, all right? And the world is a given. What's the world is a given here? Well, the world is a given in the sense of the power that lays claim to the agency or your sovereignty that you don't demonstrate. And so when you go and you try temporalise place with other people, and yet it presupposes that agency of facing off with a power removed from yourself, with ultimately the power that you don't animate, well then how is that ever going to manifest any change within the world? It's always going to be marginal, because what you're going to do, let's say that there's a demand. A demand is made against power. And you're negotiating essentially with yourself, because if you're negotiating supposedly with a representative of you as the people, and so that representative supposedly is you, but we know the way how that representative is captured by money and by special interest, and so your voice is always marginal, because money is the thing that leverages life. And so it's leveraged that representative to orientate them towards the interest that money basically wants for itself in that regards. And yet you are addressing that representative is somehow representing you as removed from yourself. And so you are like to negotiate some kind of change, some manner of removing the supposed injustice that you are protesting against. Getting back to the nature of what's at play here, how can that demonstrate any form of change? There's change and then there's change, okay? So there's change that might be very marginal in the sense that it's the marginality of it is just beholden to the marginal nature of it, and so therefore it's no effect. There's change that's marginal, but it's marginal in the way that the margin keeps on working on oblique angles, such that what you're doing is that what would otherwise be a dead culture starts to move. And the more that you move it, the more it starts to move, and the more oblique that you work on it, more on those marginal acts, okay, the marginal acts, the more it starts to move. And the more that you do it, the more it starts to move again, and you have a dynamism that is basically feeds upon itself. And so therefore it starts to remove a lot of the symptoms of our way of life. But at the moment, when you protest, you're essentially facing off against the power that you remove from yourself. So the temporalizing of place, getting back to that point, the temporalizing of place is not temporalizing place to the degree that you need to, because in that scenario, let's think about it. What have I talked about prior? I've talked about being market orientated presupposes that your want is primary because money is a given. All right? In order to look at a way of life where creativity is primary because your time is given, well, in the context of say, a protest, how are they demonstrating? How is creativity demonstrated in that regards? Where's the dynamism that is inherently creative? Because this is the point about it. So if you're looking at, you feel that you're facing off against the power, then how are you differentiating the option for another world, a potential world that's got nothing to do with the one that you're facing off against, is where I'm going with this. So if that's the case, if you think, okay, there's other people that really want to see change within the world, and so therefore how do you go about doing that? You have to literally temporalize that world. But the only way you can do that is the marginal way that you can do that, which is to temporalize a place where you share with other people. But if you do that enough, you're temporalizing place that's separated over time as well in different areas where the commonality that you share when you're temporalizing place, because you've potentialized your time beyond the economic good that you receive it as, what you're doing, you're unleashing the creativity that's left fallow when you receive the world as a given, when the world is accepted as a given, as a consumer of life. So in the marginal way, how you're temporalizing place is completely different, because what underwrites the sharing there is creativity. You go protest. what are you sharing? Are you sharing creativity? Are you sharing a grievance against? But then if you were to think of, well, what is it that you would, what's the end for this protest? Now, in some, what is it? It's like a negotiation with the power that's basically been removed from yourself. Or like, if you take the recent events, of say COVID, say for an example, it's just, the overreach of the state when they consider there to be an emergency. And, you talk about, maybe we can talk about, and there's another episode about the nature of sovereignty is, the one that determines the exception, which is really, if you want to look at trace the understanding of what we're dealing with, you only could look at the Nazi jurist Carl Schmitt, and you can look at Giorgio Agamben as far as looking at the politicization of our bare life, and when the sovereign makes an exception to a degree where you can't tell the difference between a democratic regime nor an autocratic one or a despotic one in that regards. They're highly, they don't differentiate themselves in any way when the exception basically politicizes your life. So there's no difference between the law and politics. All right, because the understanding of law is the positive understanding of law. You really got to work back to the violence that constitutes law, and it's very invariably the person who decides on the exception as to where or when the exception is determined. So, in the nature of COVID, well, it's just determining that this is when you can suspend all the positive understandings of law, and so you can suspend the Constitution. I mean, I live in Melbourne, and so the draconian measures of the state government it has its reason in the biopolitical understanding of power that people just aren't aware of. You don't have to look at any conspiracy to realise that what's actually at play is just something that's within the actual political culture of the West that's been there for a few hundred years. So, but in the matter of like protest, it's just people that have grievance of the overreach as far as their understanding of the limits of that power. But maybe what it's doing is just bringing into relief the sheer claim of life that power has when it can make an exception of the supposed threat that where it used to be, think of the Nazis that burnt down the Reichstag, think of like all false flags that are used. Now where's the threat? Well, it's in every single person, supposedly. And so every single person can be a scapegoat for people's non-thinking as far as actually what's going on there. And if you don't look at the political genealogy of this, then you're just really going to be blindsided because it's literally looking at your bare life in that regard. So, but anyway, getting back to protest. Protest is just simply trying to temporalise plays, but it doesn't do it in a manner where it's the creativity is the given, because as much as it might be potentialising the time beyond the economic good, it's not the creativity is not the thing that is primary in that regards, because if you're talking about creativity and we're talked about accepting the world as a given. To not accept the world as a given, and so therefore to take issue with it, but then to consider the nature of justice as the derivative understanding of justice rather than the primordial understanding of an injustice when we make ourselves marginal, when we are beholden to the abstraction of time, when we create time into a thing. That's ultimately the injustice that you need to deal with. Now, if you're dealing with that injustice, then you're literally looking at the marginal way that you can approach it, where you're temporalising place where creativity is the given, because your time is the thing that can be potentialised beyond the economic good. So in the manner of a protest, it's beholden to not considering the full scope of your agency. You have agency in that regards to go out into protest, but do you have the agency to stop and actually really think about the way how that you, with other people, creates the world, and not just create a world, but will create a world that's separate from the world that's given for ourselves now? Because even if, say, there was to be some resolution, what would be the resolution? What would be the given in that scenario? It would be just the same world that we accept, a market-orientated way of life. It would just presuppose that is the way of life, that we never question in the manner that if we're going to see past a way of life, the only way that you can see past it is by animating the creation of a new one that diverges. And the only way that you can do that is with other people. And the only way that you can truly do that from essentially from the ground up is to look at the full scope of your agency as a human being and to understand where it's been inhibited to express it. And so therefore think, okay, there's a claim on my life. We've got to work within the marginality that I've accepted for ourselves over countless generations and work in a manner where you can slowly release that. And so if you do that, then what you're looking at, you're animating something in the world that's just not given. And it becomes a revolution without it being beholden to the snare of the way how revolutions occur that have occurred throughout history. It's completely different. And I won't go into that. I'll probably do it at another episode. But I just thought that looking at protest, just to say again, it's just good to get an understanding of, because I've connected to it to justice or understanding of justice and the way how if the action that derives from a sense of a grievance of injustice then obviously engenders the action of protest, the connection is derivative. It's not primordial. It doesn't tap the actual underlying issue. If it doesn't, then it's contingent. But the contingency is problematized in the sense that it just becomes a way of managing that, rather than if you literally remove yourself by orientating with other people, where you're creating a community, an ethos, a way of life. There's no way it can be usurped, is basically what I'm getting at. And then if it can't be usurped, it can't be sidetracked, it can't be monetized, it can't be bastardized, it can't be done in any manner other than what it is. And then you are creating a way of life that separates. And you can do it basically where you are. And I've said this prior, it's just all about where you are. So if there's a movement to towns, to add big cities, and so therefore people want a sense of connection and community. But then you've got to think, okay, well, or you go out. I always say that, being in Australia, that the worst thing about small towns is that, people that the people that live in them, because they have a small town mentality, all right? So they don't have a wider field of vision. I mean, it might seem kind of derogatory to say that as much, but, it rings true. Let's be honest. So the whole thing is that because you've got to have a wider field of vision. You've got to open your field of vision up. But my point is that do people in the city, they have just as impoverished vision as what people do anywhere on the planet. I mean, once again, if you're beholden to a utopian understanding of life, if you presuppose lifestyle, a lot of people go out into small towns for lifestyle, okay, for a life. All right, and community is still supplementary to the life that they want to secure. And so they don't presuppose any difference in any manner, shape or form when they go even out there as much. Because once again, your field of vision is circumscribed and you're not potentialising a relation beyond want because you have a want for life. Anyway, until next time, take care.